So you want to smite your foes and go on crusade? Well, you've come to the right place. Once you start playing a paladin, no heretics can escape your wrath. Deus Vult! We're going to dive into all the things that make Paladin the best class in D&D 5th edition. Now before going further into this video, I want to say that I don't believe Paladin is the strongest class, nor my favorite class. I think druids, bards, and wizards contend for that top spot. However, I do think Paladin is a class that can stand alone. It can do a bit of everything. Additionally, from a role-playing perspective, a Paladin is very easy to grasp. Yet the class also has a lot of depth to it. It's great for new players and veterans alike. And I think Paladin is just such a fun class to play at all levels. And if you don't agree with me, that's fine. Leave your opinion in the comments below. Okay, first things first, let's start breaking down the Paladin class mechanically. How do you build a really good Paladin character sheet? First things first, let's talk about ability scores. As a Paladin, strength should always be your #1 ability score. It's important for hitting creatures, dealing damage, and also a lot of your armor has a strength requirement. Basic plate armor in D&D 5th edition requires at least 15 strength. So strength is important, however, unlike other classes, strength doesn't need to get up to 20. I think in most cases, 18 strength is enough for a paladin, meaning you can max out your strength at level 4 and not touch it again, ever. But why do I say that? Because Paladin has two other ability scores that are incredibly important for its functioning. These two ability scores are the Charisma and Constitution scores. Now it's hard to know which of these two scores we should rank as the second most important. Charisma fuels your spellcasting and your auras, while Constitution is your health and your concentration checks. This is what I tell all young paladins. If you are the only healer in the party, go Constitution. You cannot afford to be going down. If you go down as the only healer, the likelihood of a TPK jumps up exponentially. Get your Constitution between 16 and 18 after Strength. Now, if there are others with even a modicum of consistent healing, i.e. Cleric, Ranger, Druids, then go Charisma. Charisma increases the number of spells you have prepared, your save DC for spells, and your damage from spells. Additionally, beyond 6th level when you get your aura, Charisma will begin boosting all other saves for you and your party. 1 point in Charisma for a Paladin is the equivalent of increasing all your other saving throws by 1. Now this aura and extra spell slots means nothing if you go unconscious. And this is the great Paladin trade-off. Usually you can only boost 1, so you have to decide between Charisma and Constitution. From what I've seen, if you already have a healer or someone who can heal in a pinch in the party, Charisma is the move. Divine Sense, a feature you get at 1st level as a Paladin. This is your early warning fiend and undead sonar. If evil is close, you're gonna detect it. I will say that this is a very DM dependent feature. My advice is to use it early and often. Whenever you enter a room, just fire off a Divine Sense just because. You should never have a Divine Sense left after a long rest for any reason. And if you do it enough, eventually you're going to catch something. Think of using Divine Sense as going fishing. You're not going to catch something every time the hook goes into the water. You gotta keep casting, and then you pull up a massive fucking demon. I mean, look at that thing. It was just hiding in a corner. But you never would have known that if you didn't keep on using your Divine Sense. And from an out-of-game perspective, if your Dungeon Master sees you using Divine Sense a lot, it's gonna get into the back of their head. A good Dungeon Master might throw in a few scenarios where your Divine Sense is going to hit. Basically, you're making it easier for your DM to incorporate this feature into the campaign. But you have to be using it early and often. My advice is to not hoard uses of your Divine Sense. Keep firing it off as much as you can. Woo! This is one of my favorite features. Honestly, if Paladins didn't have access to Smite, but still had Lay on Hands, people would still play Paladins. Lay on Hands, for any party, is just so good. And it's good for 3 reasons. Firstly, you know exactly how much healing you have. Other healing spells, it's left up to chance. Not with Lay on Hands, you know exactly how much you have and nothing is wasted. It really allows you to maximize this class feature. And this kind of ties into my second point, which is that Lay on Hands can be used precisely as an action. Technically, you can heal a PC for only 1 hit point, or you can heal that same PC to full if you have enough points in your Lay on Hands pool. You can save your healing and use it precisely how you want. And thirdly, the healing resource is kept safe within a martial character. As a paladin, you're sturdier than pretty much any other healer. On average, you're going to have more hit points and you're going to have a higher AC. Therefore, in even the deadliest battles, you can still have a healer up and fighting. That's you. With all this combined, you have a first level class feature. It's insane that this is first level. That is going to be useful until the end of your campaign. I consider this a 10 out of 10 class feature. Lay on Hands is a beautiful class ability. Alright, the Paladin has 7 fighting styles. But that's kind of a misnomer. After Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, there's really 2 that you need to consider. 3 if you're really wanting to be a tank character. The first fighting style that you need to look at is defense. +1 to your AC is never bad. Due to a concept known as bounded accuracy in D&D 5th edition, this +1 to your AC is very significant. You're going to feel that boost in AC throughout the entirety of your campaign. Second, and really the fighting style that is head and shoulders above the rest, is Blessed Warrior. This insane fighting style was released in Tasha's, and it allows the Paladin to pick 2 cantrips from the cleric spell list. This is stupid good. Paladins can now always have magic. It used to be that they could only cast via spell slots, or you had to burn an ASI to take a feat. But you don't need to do that anymore. Now at 2nd level, you can just have 2 cantrips, and the cleric cantrip list is one of the best in 5th edition. Now breaking this down even further, there is 1 must-have cantrip that you should take and 2 or 3 others that are in 2nd place. If you take Blessed Warrior, the Guidance cantrip is a must in my opinion. It is an S tier cantrip, borderline broken, infinite use, just a boost to all ability checks. Therefore, why not just take it? The other 3 that I consider you looking at are Spare the Dying, Thaumaturgy, and Toll the Dead. But in reality, you can take any of the cleric cantrips and this is still a god tier fighting style. The only reason you don't choose Blessed Warrior over defense is if you want to play a simpler character, or you just want to get a character with a really high AC. Like if your entire goal of your Paladin is having an AC of 25 or higher. Or if you want to play a tank. But if you want to play a tank, you go with the Interception fighting style. You taking this fighting style signals that you want to play a tank. It gives you a reaction that allows you to reduce the damage other characters take. Depending on your character concept and group, this can be a really flavorful and useful fighting style. However, you really have to commit to the tank life if you're going to choose it. My recommendation is to not choose this fighting style if we're going to just keep it in the back of your pocket. You need to be really trying to tank and you have to be in a group that facilitates that type of gameplay. Otherwise, Blessed Warrior is just simply better. Okay kids, listen up. Welcome to SMITE 101. At SMITE 101, we're going to teach you how to get the most out of the Paladin's signature class ability. I mean really, who doesn't want to light up their holy sword with holy fire and just cleanse evil? But seriously though, there's little better in 5th edition than getting off a smite on a critical hit and watching those damage numbers skyrocket. It's absolutely fantastic. So what does smite do? Well, when you make a melee weapon attack, you're going to do extra radiant damage to a target. You essentially do 1d8 radiant damage plus an additional 1d8 for each spell level you burn. So if you're smiting at 2nd level, that's 2d8 damage from the spell level and an extra 1d8 on top of it. You then do an additional 1d8 damage if you're attacking into an undead or a fiend. After 4th level slots, your smites stop growing. So only use smites with 5th level spell slots or higher if you're in an emergency situation. But really, the main problem with smite is players understanding when to use it. Now, there are 2 main strategies for using smite. The first strategy is, if it dead, no more damage. Burn all smites fast, kill enemy. This is the Ooga Booga Paladin strat. You hit things really hard, really fast. Now the second strategy, which I personally advocate for, is the Patient Smite. Wait a bit. Smite on critical hits. And if you reach round 2, 2.5, it's smite o'clock. You can start burning those smites. This means that you burn through smites less quickly, and you're using smites in situations where they will matter the most. That's on crits and more difficult battles. But I also like the second strategy for kind of a more meta reason, because it's better for DMs and players. This is my argument for it. If you are a DM and you're wanting to have a big, challenging boss encounter, and you know the Paladin goes all out, you gotta account for that and add some extra hit points. Because while it's fun sometimes to have a boss encounter that finishes in 1 round, it's not something that we all want all the time. There's a reason why players and DMs get really excited for these big climactic fights, because we want them to be epic, challenging, dangerous even. So what happens in this situation? Well, the Paladin runs in, begins to smite like crazy, and the boss is halfway dead. Yeah, they did a lot of damage, but we still got another 2 rounds of combat to go. And there might be cool moments, but again, as a Paladin, smiting is your big ticket item in combat. And you've played all your big tickets at the very start. Now let's look at the more reserved Paladin smite method. The DM still might add a few extra hit points. But if a DM isn't feeling like you're just going to destroy their encounters immediately, psychologically players, they're not going to add as many hit points. Because really they just want it to feel like a challenge. A lot of great DMs that I've had the pleasure playing with really just want everyone to have their moment. So if you wait until round 2, 2.5 to start going all out with your smites, that gives people time to have their moments. And therefore, at the end of the battle, when you start going all out, it's going to feel bigger. You might even do less damage as a whole, but that damage is going to feel more impactful. I hope you get what I'm saying here. And some of you might be thinking, whoa, is this metagaming? And I suppose the answer is, it depends. Because we do metagame all the time as players. We know we have to come together as a party. We know we have to stay together as a party. We know we don't want to take actions that frustrate the other players. And also we need to kind of recognize that the DM is a player in all this too. And the DM's fun comes from their world building, their story, their characters. I like to think I'm making the mechanical case and the role-playing case for being a more patient smiter. But at the end of the day, it's your character and you can choose to completely disregard this advice. But so far, over the past 8 or 9 years, I've ran for more than 25 different Paladins. And from my personal perspective, smites feel cooler at the end of combats than at the beginning. And also it's less of a drain on your overall resources. And of course, you're sharing the spotlight with all the other players. Okay, back to the other class features now. Spellcasting and spell slots. Yes, you can do other things with your spell slots rather than just smiting. And if you take one thing away from this video, it's that you should be casting more spells as a Paladin. Let me explain why. Paladins are preparation spellcasters. The Paladin has access to their entire spell list, and you can switch out all those spells on a long rest. And this is important because the Paladin spell list is really good. Not only do they have access to a ton of cleric spells, but 18 class exclusive spells. And they're all pretty good spells. That's the thing that blows my mind. There really aren't a lot of stinkers in here. When I look at the Paladin spell list, I see a support caster / healer. You're really good at buffing your allies and healing with a few anti-debuff spells. We'll talk about this more later, but the Paladin's biggest weakness is its lack of ranged options. Seriously, if you have something outside of your melee range as a Paladin, you have such a hard time messing with it in any meaningful way. But that can be quote-unquote solved by always keeping 1 or 2 support spells in case you can't whack something on your turn in combat. Follow the ABCs as a Paladin. Always be casting. Either you cast a spell or you cast sword, one or the other. A few of these spells to keep in mind are Bless, Aid, Aura of Vitality, Aura of Life, and Circle of Power. Spell slots are more than just charges for your smites. The Paladin spell list is a very versatile list and covers your weaknesses well. In my opinion, the difference between a good and great Paladin is knowing when to use your action to attack a smaller creature for some damage, or choosing to buff your entire team. When a really good Paladin figures out that balance, they become lethal. Now some never do, and that's okay though. Later in this video we'll talk battle tactics. Go to this time right here if you want to learn more right now. Otherwise, on to more class features. Divine Health is a fine-ish ability. I have a love and hate relationship with this class feature. I like to, in some campaigns, offer to trade in this class feature for a +1 to any stat or half proficiency in a skill. This is for kind of 2 reasons. First reason, in some campaigns, you're never going to use this class feature. It's kind of going to be pointless, and I want my players to feel excited when they gain something new. And then there's the second reason, because the way Divine Health and Lay on Hands interacts with diseases really limits the DM design space. If you're wanting to run a campaign surrounding a type of disease or infection, then Divine Health with its just blanket disease protection is really going to impact you. Again, there are workarounds available, and if you're a DM and you're struggling with this, talk to your players. See if you can reach a solution. But at the end of the day, I highly recommend that you don't just take this class feature away. That's a rabbit hole that usually leads to really bad things when you go down it. I often find that giving players a choice really helps things move a lot easier, and you also have to be okay with them just saying no. but in 90% of campaigns, divine health is going to be a non-factor. Okay, channel Divinity. Where to start? There's not a lot to talk about with this as it's so subclass specific. My advice to you is to pay way more attention to the spells your subclass is giving you over the channel Divinity. You only get one channel Divinity, and most of these channel divinities are actions. Between attacking with your weapon and spells, you're not going to be using your channel divinity all that often. Again, your mileage may vary. I've seen paladins that have used their channel divinity once per session, and paladins that have used their channel divinity 5 times per campaign. So yes, while channel divinities are nice, I actually wouldn't put that much importance on them. Most paladins I've played with, played as, and run for don't use channel divinity all that often. So when you're making your decision about your subclass, I would recommend that you weigh the channel divinity less than other features it gives you. And after Tasha's, I've seen a lot of paladins converting their channel divinities into another spell slot. So I kind of see this as Wizards of the Coast waving the white flag with some subclasses, and just acknowledging that in some games, channel divinity is just not a factor. But if you're one of those paladins that use channel divinity all the time, tell us about it in the comments below. Maybe you're doing something differently that we can all learn from. The main limiting force of a paladin, other than it not having ranged attacks, is its number of attacks. Or at least you would think. Now supposedly, getting no more than 2 attacks keeps paladins in line with other martials. I'm a little iffy about this, especially if you're in a game that doesn't run 3 to 4 encounters per long rest. So how do you kind of offset this? Well, one of the best things you can do as a paladin is finding ways of getting a 3rd attack during your turn. Feats like Sentinel, Polearm Master, and Great Weapon Master can all help facilitate this. Hell, I've seen a Smite crazed dual-wielding longsword and dagger paladin that was extremely effective. 2 attacks with their action, 1 attack with their offhand as a bonus action. Their damage was routinely over 80 a turn. And I think that this worked out because your attacks are worth almost as much as your smites when you're playing a paladin. Missing even 1 attack can be very costly. Do everything you can to maximize your 2 chances to hit, because every hit could be a crit, and with every crit could be a smite, with every smite can be a death, and with every death we get to shout Deus Vult! So who wouldn't want more attacks? But I also kind of want to wrap this around to our previous discussion about knowing when to attack and when to buff. Because if you have disadvantage on melee attacks for that round, and you have the chance to unleash one of your powerful buff spells on your party, really good paladins take the time to think through whether they should attack or buff the party. I'm not saying that you're always going to come to the conclusion that you should cast a spell over just attacking. Maybe that happens 1 out of 3 times. But that one time that you do choose to use that buff spell could mean all the difference in a battle. I've seen it many times. So as a paladin, treat those attacks with care. And know what a successful attack is worth to you and the rest of your party. Before 6th level, the paladin was vulnerable. But not anymore! This is the last part of the paladin's holy trinity: Smite, Lay on Hands, and Aura of Protection. These 3 features are a lethal combination. Aura of Protection adds your charisma modifier to all your saving throws, and the saving throws of allies within 10 feet of you. This aura goes up to 30 feet at 18th level, but because so few of you are ever going to go past 12th level, always think about Aura of Protection as being 10 feet. This class feature makes you and all your allies incredibly resistant to saving throws. Let me recontextualize this class feature for you. Imagine every +1 in 5th edition as a 5% boost to your overall chances. When you get Aura of Protection, you'll probably have a +2 or +3 modifier in charisma. That means you and your allies will have a 10 to 15% boost in all saving throws. Not 1, not 2, but 6 saving throws. This is outstanding and takes you and your party above the normal 5th edition power curve for the remaining of your 14 levels. What? Excuse me? Everyone talks about nerfing Smite, and as someone who has seen 25 to 30 paladins while playing 5th edition, Aura of Protection is the thing I dread the most. I can handle smites, I can handle lay on hands, I can handle ridiculously high ACs. But this aura is the bane of my existence. And we'll talk about how to use this class feature more in the battle tactics section of this video. And yeah, I know that my players are going to use all of this information against me, but I'm doing this for your benefit. So consider liking and subscribing if you made it this far. But my general recommendation is to prioritize this class feature by boosting your charisma modifier. Now you might be thinking, nothing really happens at 9th level. Haha, wrong. 3rd level spells. 3rd level spells, for any class, constitute a major jump in power. At this level, you gain powerhouse spells like Revivify, Dispel Magic, and Spirit Shroud. Don't just think of this level in terms of a higher level of SMITE. You gain access to so many powerful spells that great paladins don't ignore. Honestly, if you're just using your 3rd level spell slots to smite, you're doing your dungeon master a favor by nerfing yourself. So keep that in mind. Aura of Courage, not a lot to say. It's another aura, really makes creatures that rely on the frightened condition seem meager by comparison. Against creatures like dragons that rely on things like frightening presence, the paladin truly shines. You make him look like a bit of a bitch. The main thing to remember about Aura of Courage is really just remembering this ability when a fear condition comes forward. Because you all know the feeling of watching your dungeon master get so happy about getting their cool ability off and then being able to look them dead in the face and say, no, I'm the dungeon master now, that doesn't happen. Aura of Courage allows you to do that with the frightened condition, so don't miss out on your chance to let all the happiness and joy drain out of your dungeon master's face. And Dungeon Masters, you might be a bit peeved that I'm telling players about all of these things, but now we're going to talk about the Paladin's weaknesses. So I've just spent the last 20 minutes talking about all the great things Paladins can do. With that in mind, Paladins have only 2 weaknesses, one mechanical and one role-playing that a DM can tap into. Their mechanical weakness is their lack of ranged damage. As a class, Paladins might have the worst ranged damage. I mean, honestly, they suck. Therefore, if you can keep a paladin at a distance, you can drastically reduce their combat effectiveness. I'm coming at this from the perspective that you're still wanting your party to win the combat encounter. You're just trying to add a bit of difficulty. And so to do that, add environmental hazards or difficult terrain to hinder their movement. Enemies like goblins with their ability to disengage as a bonus action can drive your paladin wild. They'll never be able to get in range and bring their powerful smites to bear. If you're wanting to make a combat encounter that really challenges a paladin, provide enemies that can keep out of their reach or battlefield obstacles that can hinder their movement. Simple as that, kinda. Because again, paladins still have ways to be useful while not dealing damage. So apart from that, you can just pray, hopefully to a different god than the paladin's serving, else you're still kinda screwed. But there's the paladin's second weakness that we can exploit, their oath. We'll talk about this a bit more in the next section, but a paladin's oath is the driving force behind their roleplay. Being committed to a promise gives your character an ideological touchstone. However, ideologies can sometimes conflict with what we want to do. It's a limiting factor. It is a set of shackles that your player has willingly chosen. By creating circumstances where the paladin's oath conflicts with what they want to do, we can create some fantastic character moments. Take, for example, a paladin who is dedicated to the god of mercy. They are confronted by a situation where a lieutenant of the BBEG has turned themselves into the party. This NPC killed the rogue's whole family because of course they did, it's the rogue. Now, as a paladin dedicated to the idea of mercy, while this NPC is certainly evil, your oath dictates that you can't simply kill this person. However, the rogue wants an eye for an eye. It is up to you to navigate that situation. This is obviously a simplistic example, but as a DM, you can put a paladin into conflict with their oath. There is technically a third weakness that theoretically is there, but I've seen it pop up less and less over the years. A paladin survives off their spell slots. When a paladin runs out of spell slots, they're just a worse fighter. Unless you take Blessed Warrior, then, you're a little bit different. A zesty fighter, if you will. Some would argue, though, that a paladin's third weakness is that they need to conserve resources. I politely disagree. Few D&D groups nowadays, based on polls, my own combing of Reddit, and experiences, do the 3 to 4 encounters per adventuring day. Therefore, few paladins are actually running out of spell slots. I haven't personally seen attrition being a problem for paladins. I realize theoretically in a white room, yeah, attrition is a problem, but white room theory crafting isn't actual D&D. What actually happens is if the paladin starts to get low on spell slots, everyone goes, hey, let's take a long rest. If you're in a game that runs many encounters, this is something to take into account. However, if you're running a more modern game with fewer combats, more role-playing opportunities, and few if any dungeon crawls, I wouldn't count on this attrition argument. My suggestion is to just mess with the paladin's ability to get into melee range, and also provide these conundrums based upon what the paladin or group wants and their oath. I found these two solutions to be the most effective. But up until this point, we've taken a majority of the time to look at the Paladin mechanically. But D&D is a role-playing game, so let's look at how to roleplay a Paladin. Yeah, this video would be incomplete if I didn't at least touch on role-playing a Paladin. Whatever their origin and their mission, Paladins are united by oaths to stand against the forces of evil, whether sworn before God's altar, in the witness of a priest, in a sacred glade before nature spirits and fey beings, or in a moment of desperation and grief with the dead as the only witness. A Paladin's oath is a powerful bond. It is a source of power that turns a devout warrior into a blessed champion. The player's handbook notes that a Paladin swears to uphold justice and righteousness, to stand with the good things of the world against the encroaching darkness, and to hunt the forces of evil wherever they may lurk. These Paladins also train for years in martial combat as well to fight this evil, or at least this perceived evil. You see, these details give us a lot of insight into what a Paladin is. First, let's discuss your oath. An oath is a solemn promise regarding the future of a person's actions. It is a purpose statement. Whatever your Paladin's oath, it is a promise so deep and powerful that it carries them through life. Now, I think I'm about to get a little controversial for a second. This is the biggest difference between clerics and paladins. A cleric swears devotion to a god, while a paladin's powers come from their promise. While this promise is often divine in nature and sponsored by a god, it doesn't necessarily mean a paladin needs a god. A paladin's belief and internal drive, as shown by them being a charisma caster, is enough to produce these effects. They're not using wisdom, they're not using faith. While clerics and paladins have similar spells, a paladin is not driven by faith. They aren't called the Crusader class. As much as we like to liken them to the Crusaders and Templars of the past, a paladin at their core is someone who is driven by their promises. That promise could be to follow a deity or what that deity represents, but it doesn't have to be. The paladin has evolved since earlier editions of Dungeons & Dragons. So let's re-examine what the paladin is. Because from the information we're told, we can derive a lot of values from paladins. We can get a real strong foundation for what they are and how to roleplay them. Paladins are likely honorable. Now, the definition of honor can vary from paladin to paladin. What one paladin thinks is honorable, another might find morally corrupt. But really, this honor encapsulates any other virtues. So really, this just means a paladin has a consistent set of normative ethics that it follows. And if you're a paladin, you would probably also be true to your word and lie very little. Honesty and commitment to your word is paramount to the nature of a paladin's power. I mean, all your power is derived from your word and your promises. If you are that true to your word, I find it very difficult to believe that you're going to be a deceitful paladin, or the circumstances would have to be very special. But maybe that's a failing on my part, because paladins are usually righteous, but do not have to be when we think about it. Being morally right doesn't come innately in the territory of a promise. When we're considering what comes from the promise a paladin makes, that initial promise can be outside of a traditional normative ethical set, or rather outside a traditional moral framework. If I promise to conquer the world because my warlord father couldn't do it before he died, that doesn't mean I'm righteous for doing that. I will certainly have a sense of honor, duty, and fairness. My father was wrong, so I shall right this wrong, but moral virtue? No, I don't think that necessarily follows. As a warlord, I'll have to do many things that seem to fall outside of being good. Maybe I have to lie for political reasons. Maybe I have to send a group of soldiers off to die in order to achieve victory. So does your paladin have to be righteous? No. Well, does your paladin have to be just? The player's handbook talks about a paladin being committed to justice. Now, the definition of justice is vague. Philosophers have argued about this definition since ancient Greece, and it is within those litany of definitions that we also find a lot of expressions of how your paladin can be formed. Importantly, this sense of justice doesn't necessarily extend to the written laws in a society. Just because a paladin is lawful doesn't mean they have to follow the laws. They are ordered by their oath, not the laws of the land. A paladin answers to an authority greater than any townsguard or mayor or even a king. They answer to the tenets of their own oath. Think about it like this. If you were walking down the street and a toddler handed you a piece of paper that said, "You cannot walk here," would you listen to that toddler? No, of course not. You're following the laws of the actual city that you're in. And that's kind of what a paladin might think. Who cares if a town's guard tells me something? I'm serving my god. I'm serving my oath. I'm upholding my promise. And that goes far beyond what this little person is trying to tell me. So in reality, we have a class dedicated towards a promise which they believe is right. That doesn't mean a paladin upholds true righteousness. I mean, heck, many religious institutions claim righteousness only to fall short of their own morals. And this opens up a spectrum of different paladins. In all other mediums, really great characters have this internal conflict, this internal tension. A character wants both X and Y. They want both peace and freedom. They want the girl, but they want the job. This internal struggle is what gives us a character arc. As a DM, I work really hard to help my players make characters with these internal conflicts. Yet, I barely need to work with paladins because, naturally, unless they have access to the true moral good of the universe, there will be tension with their oath. Navigating that tension makes for a dynamic, three-dimensional powerhouse of a character. This conflict between your promise as a paladin and your situation is a well that you and your DM can continue to go back to over the course of the campaign. And I've never seen that well of storytelling run dry. In my opinion, this is one of the best parts of playing a paladin, that tension that is naturally there. For paladins, this also works well because of your natural proclivity for leadership. Remember, your oath is driving you. You have high charisma and a purpose. As a paladin, you help drive the party towards your goals. You swore an oath, so your paladin obviously wants something. So go out and head towards that goal. You have everything you need. Not only do you have the strength, but you have the charisma to get things done. Embrace the difficulties and the quandaries that will be placed in front of your character. But you can use that oath, that promise, as a guiding star. Your paladin can even get really creative with your oath and how it's implemented. Here are a few examples. An oath around a particular virtue, an oath to uphold justice, peace, etc. There's that tension between what you think that virtue is and edge cases that are presented in front of you. What does it mean to uphold peace? Does that mean you can't fight the oncoming bandits? Does that mean you can't take preventative action? Or there's an oath to serve a particular god that doesn't want your service. Say that you love the goddess of light so much that you want everyone to be under her guidance. Therefore, at 3rd level, you swear an oath of conquest so that all will be pure, so that all can be under the guidance of your god. Now, the neutral good goddess might reject your promise, but hey, you know that the world would be much better if everyone worshipped your goddess. What a conundrum, right? Or finally, take an oath centered around protecting and guiding a particular noble bloodline. The quality of the noble's rule varies over the years, but your loyalty does not. Think outside the box and play around with the oath, how you follow it, and how it affects people around you. Also, of course, with all of this, check in with your dungeon master. Your DM and you gotta be on the same page with your character. If you're not, then you fall into the lawful stupid trap. The lawful stupid paladin is up there with the chaotic neutral rogue as the worst archetype in D&D. Lawful stupid often refers to a paladin that is so focused around their oath or the local laws that they bring down the rest of the party and make the session miserable. They attack the rogue when they break into a house to steal the MacGuffin, or rat out the lying warlock who's trying to avoid the party getting captured. Over my time DMing and playing, I've broken this lawful stupid behavior into 2 camps. Stupid from rigidity and stupid from principles. Stupid from rigidity comes from a paladin wanting to immediately stop any action which clashes with their oath. This is a zealous paladin who often provides 0 wiggle room for transgressions. The best way I like to solve this is by talking to the player about the goals of the paladin, because even the most morally rigid people can't just denounce and attack others every time they see something that is undesirable. Your paladin, at some point, was not righteous in their own eyes. So, how do you change that behavior? It is through understanding that every undesirable action does not need to be stopped immediately with force. These actions are simply another example of the masses failing to live up to the ideal of a model citizen. Of course, your paladin can admonish the offender afterward, but it's with the goal of showing them the error of their ways, rather than just dispensing violent justice on the spot. Think about it logically. A missionary who kills any non-believer they see will convert nobody. No god or person would want a paladin who is that rigid. They would have 0 followers after 1 generation. And by explaining this to a player, we can usually massage that character concept. Now, perhaps that is exactly what the player wanted, a super zealous individual who's completely unreasonable. That is stupid from principles. That's fine, but you're not playing at my table. You are actively trying to create a character that fights with the party in that case. That is the logical end point of that character. D&D is a team game. You cannot play it alone. You have to make a character that can work with others. If you cannot, then you gotta find another table. There is a difference between a player who's trying to play this morally pure character, whose worldview isn't really subject to change, and therefore is very rigid, and simply goes about it in a way that breeds a lot of conflict, versus a player whose entire character is built around having that conflict with the party. Being lawful doesn't mean being stupid. It means maintaining a certain code of values. When we're trying to enforce those values, it is important to understand the little intricacies and gray areas. You don't need to fight with your party members or NPCs about everything. Yet, standing up for your oath every once in a while also isn't being lawful stupid. Like all things, check in with your DM and other party members to make sure you're all on the same page outside of game. You can straight up tell people, this is a line my character will not cross. They will act like this, so be aware. This method has been highly effective because communication makes everything better. Whew! With all of that out of the way, let's talk about races. There are so many great races to choose from as a paladin. I want to give you 10 of the best races in no particular order, starting off with the Dragonborn. The reason for the Dragonborn being here is very simple. They have a ranged attack. Literally, that's it. With other classes, they will find that the Dragonborn's breath weapon is kinda meager. You probably have better options that you could use. For most paladins, that's not the case. Especially towards higher levels, that breath weapon is looking a lot better than just a javelin. So don't be afraid, embrace the Dragonborn. Next up, I highly recommend playing a Bugbear. It has 3 racial features that really jive well with a paladin. Firstly, dark vision, that never hurts. Second, it's long-limbed. This means you have an extra 5 feet of reach for your attacks. Makes it a lot harder for creatures to run away from you. And finally, you're sneaky. Paladins have a hard time stealthing sometimes, so proficiency in the stealth skill never hurts. Additionally, you have a feature called Surprise Attack, which is just more damage if you can get it off. And it is essentially just a free smite, so you don't even really need to burn a spell slot with that attack. And Bugbear Paladins are just really different and cool. Being a generally lazy goblinoid, it's really interesting to figure out how a Bugbear became a Paladin. The backstory just kind of writes itself. Next up is the Deep Gnome. It has a lot of things that just make your paladin more paladin-y. Firstly, dark vision, always a plus. Then it has gnomish magic resistance, advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. Combine this with your aura of protection and you're never failing an intelligence, wisdom, or charisma saving throw after 6th level. It's crazy. And then their final feature, Sphere Fnibbling Camouflage, allows you to make a stealth check at advantage. And you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. Once again, sneaking for paladins isn't your forte, usually you'll have disadvantage. This class feature though makes it so that it will just be a straight roll for you, and that's better than nothing. Now moving from the Deep Gnome to essentially the Deep Dwarf in the Dwagar. Dwagar benefit from dark vision and Dwagar magic. Not only do you get the Enlarge Reduce spell, which allows you to do more melee damage, but you get invisibility, which, once again, helps with stealth. Finally, you gain access to Psionic Fortitude, which gives you advantage on saving throws made to avoid or end the charmed or stunned conditions. Both of those conditions really suck for a paladin, so having that advantage is nice. The next 2 races are kind of a double header. They are the Gith Yankee and the Gith Zerai. I like to think of the difference between these 2 races as offensive versus defensive. The Gith Yankee provides you with a litany of offensive options. The main thing you have in your arsenal is Misty Step. At 5th level, gaining access to this teleport spell really allows you to move around the battlefield. Better yet, it doesn't expend a spell slot. It gives you a free get out of jail free card if the battlefield hazards in front of you are just too much. That Pocket Misty Step is a get out of jail free card. And at 3rd level, you gain a lesser version of that with the jump spell. I know the jump spell gets hated on a lot, but I find it remarkably useful when given to strength-based characters. It's so fun to watch them jump around the battlefield, avoiding all the traps and pitfalls and hazards you set for them. So if you really want to get in close into melee range, Gith Yankee. Now the Gith Zerai are a bit different. At 3rd level, you're going to gain the shield spell. That's a +5 to your AC as a reaction. That's pretty crazy. Now, if you're the only healer in a party and you want to keep yourself safe, having a free pocket shield spell is super good. Additionally, you have a use of Detect Thoughts at 5th level, and Detect Thoughts is one of my favorite utility spells in the entire game. And because you can use your own spell slots to cast these spells multiple times, I find the Gith Zerai Psionics feature to be more than worth it. Now, you're going to sacrifice your offensive capacity, but by adding this shield spell, your defensive capacity is going to jump leaps and bounds. By 6th level, once you get your Aura of Protection, you're going to kind of be untouchable. So really take a look at the Gith Zerai. Now, if you want a happy middle ground between the Gith Yankee and the Gith Zerai, might I recommend the Orc. The Orc race has come a long way since the early days of 5th edition, and right now I consider it one of the best races in the game. You get Dark Vision, always a bonus. You gain the Adrenaline Rush racial feature, which allows you to dash as a bonus action, and you can do this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. And on top of this, you gain temporary hit points. This is crazy good for a Paladin. Not only are you getting up into melee range, but you're gaining temporary hit points? And on top of all this, you have your Relentless Endurance feature. So if you're reduced down to 0 hit points, once per long rest, you can just drop to 1 hit point instead. And if you're then able to survive until your turn, you have your Lay on Hands pool to pick you back up. The Orc is a sensational race for a Paladin. Highly recommend. In person, I've seen an Orc Paladin once, and my god were they majestic. Able to move all around the battlefield, hit enemies like a truck, and even when the DM was targeting that Orc Paladin with everything they had, they still survived. Ridiculous. Now the next race is kinda like the Orc, but instead of a defensive measure, it has an offensive measure. I'm talking about the Minotaur. Minotaurs have also been getting buffed as of late, which I'm more than a fan of. Goring Rush allows you to attack and then make a bonus action attack with your horns. Usage of this may vary depending or not if your DM will allow you to smite with your horns or not. But secondly, you gain something called Hammering Horns. After you hit a creature as part of your attack action, you can attempt to push that creature away from you. This helps with positioning creatures away from your party members, or helping to position creatures closer to your party members so you can get in close and give the party members your aura. It gives you a lot of versatility and freedom with how you're wanting to move as a Paladin. Now I said that these races weren't in any particular order, however, it's between the Orc and the Shadar Kai for the #1 race in my opinion. The Shadar Kai are elves from the Shadowfell, and oh my god are their abilities so powerful. Firstly, they have dark vision, but they also have necrotic resistance. As a Paladin, when you're fighting undead, necrotic resistance is common. Same if you're fighting fiends. Having a flat resistance against that just makes you an even better devil and undead hunter. You can also finish a long rest in only 4 hours, which, fine depending on your campaign, but you gain the Blessing of the Raven Queen. What is the Blessing of the Raven Queen, you might ask? Well, as a bonus action, you can teleport up to 30 feet, it's like a Misty Step. And at 3rd level, when you're done teleporting, you gain resistance to all damage, at least until the start of your next turn. Excuse me? You can teleport into the heart of the enemies, start smiting, and then they can't take you down. Yeah, this is crazy. Now you might be thinking, oh, I can only use this once per long rest. No, you can use this number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, even with the most combat heavy campaigns. You can use this once per combat. I played a Shadar Kai Paladin once, and let me tell you, the move was bonus action teleport into the front line of the enemy turn 1 as quickly as I could, then have them all attack into me, and they all do half damage. And they had to attack me, because if they didn't, I would keep on using my abilities, my auras, my smites, and they would all just continue to die. And don't even get me started about boss fights. Shadar Kai during boss fights are stupid. especially if you save all your teleports, because then you just have resistance to all damage throughout the entirety of the boss fight. They are ridiculous. But I still have one race left for you. The simple, yet powerful, variant human. I'll be honest here, there are a lot of great feats that a paladin can take. And being a variant human, allowing yourself to take one of those feats at level 1 is really important. Because paladins are so ASI dependent, that taking a feat costs a lot. But what feats are good, you might ask? Here are a few fantastic feats that I recommend for paladins. First up, and a little personal favorite of mine, is the charger feat. For a lot of characters, the charger feat kinda sucks. But here's the thing, with paladins, you're constantly fighting to get into melee range, and you already have so few attacks anyway. It's not that big of a loss to take the dash action, run up, and then bonus action swing in with a +5 to damage. Especially if you're planning on smiting, for the average fighter, this can equate to about 2 attacks. So I actually find that paladins aren't losing a lot on their turns. Sometimes I've seen paladins with an enemy right in front of them use the dash action to get across the battlefield to attack the squishy spellcaster instead. Because again, using charger is actually really good in certain situations for paladins. But with that being said, it is situational and it's not for everybody. The next feat, though, certainly could be for everybody, the Divinely Favored feat. This comes from the newest Dragonlance book. This feat allows you to take one cantrip from the cleric spell list, probably guidance, let's be honest here. You also learn augury, and you also learn one first level spell based off of your alignment. The caveat with taking this feat is that you should be a good or neutral character. Why is that? Because Healing Word is in both the clerics and the druid spell list. And look, you might be saying, wait, is Healing Word that good on a paladin? Yes it is. Being able to attack and then bonus action heal across the battlefield is so powerful. You basically become what the war cleric wishes it could be. Now you get one free cast of Healing Word before you even need to start burning spell slots. If you're in a party where your fellow party mates constantly are going down, definitely pick up this feat. I promise you, it will change the party dynamics overnight. Now, the prerequisite for this feat is that you have to be 4th level, and you have to be in a Dragonlance campaign. 4th level, that's fine. Personally, for my games, I don't care if it's a Dragonlance campaign or not. I allow this feat. As always, talk to your DM. Maybe they'll let you use it in a campaign that's not Dragonlance. But if you are in a Dragonlance campaign, use this feat. It'd be by far number 1 if it weren't for those 2 prerequisites. Which is crazy because there are a ton of other great feats on here. One of those feats is the Fey Touched feat. Not only do you get to boost your charisma, wisdom, or intelligence, although let's all be honest here, we're boosting our charisma by 1, you learn Misty Step and a first level spell of your choice, divination or enchantment. Doesn't really matter what you go with there, but just gaining a free Misty Step if you didn't have one is great. And if you have a divination or enchantment spell that you really want, yeah, I got no problems with Fey Touched. If at 8th level you got like a 15 in charisma, why take an ASI when you can just take this feat? Make that charisma 16, gain Misty Step, gain another spell. It works really well in that regard. Next up though is Great Weapon Master. If your paladin is wielding a great sword or another big weapon, this feat is fantastic. That extra +10 damage hits like a truck. But actually, its lesser known ability to give you an additional bonus action attack also really helps a paladin. Because you can do so much burn damage, you'll be reducing creatures to 0 hit points quite often. So that one melee attack as a bonus action is going to be procced a lot, especially if you're fighting hordes of enemies. So I highly recommend Great Weapon Master. The next 2 feats I want to talk about though work really well together. Those are Sentinel and Polearm Master. Apart from each other, they're great, but together they make a paladin that can shatter worlds. Sentinel is good for paladins for 2 reasons. 1, it doesn't allow the disengage action, so goblins and other similar enemies can't run away from you. Additionally, it gains you an extra attack. Remember, as a paladin, because we only get 1 extra attack, we're always looking for new options. Sentinel provides you with an additional smiting opportunity. Sentinel is good for any martial character, but it holds even more value for paladins, as now any enemy that attacks within 5 feet of you, another character, has to weigh their damage against your smite. Now combine this with Polearm Master and you have a menace. Polearm Master gives you an additional bonus action melee attack with a glaive, halberd, quarterstaff, or spear. I personally recommend wielding a glaive or halberd. Now this damage is great, especially in boss fights because it gives you additional smiting opportunities. So that's an extra bonus action attack, but it also gives you an extra reaction attack, because when a creature enters your reach, you can make a reaction attack. So at 5th level, if you took Polearm Master at 4th level as your feat, you can easily be making 4 attacks per round. Guys, that's fantastic. My advice is to pick up Polearm Master first and then Sentinel. I know what I'm talking about here because I was a player in a campaign where I played a Paladin that had both Polearm Master and Sentinel. It was a short campaign, ran about 12 sessions. We had about 8 combats in that campaign. My Paladin was hit once during that entire campaign because a direwolf bit my character's leg for 5 damage. But that was it. For the rest of the campaign, no damage. That was because Sentinel and Polearm Master is such a lethal combination. Enemies that got close died. They couldn't enter my range. Now that was also because I was utilizing cover and other advanced techniques, but a lot of that damage reduction and battlefield control comes down to utilizing those 2 feats. I'm telling you, this is such a powerful combination. And one final feat that I want to run by all of you is the Warcaster feat. Paladins live and die on concentration. You have so many concentration spells as a paladin, and losing concentration, especially on one of your buff spells, can hurt. If you find yourself wandering into that role more and more, of using those spell slots as buffing material, consider taking Warcaster. Your Aura of Protection should already be giving you a sizable boost to your concentration saves. This feat is just going to give you that little extra boost so that one terrible roll doesn't break your concentration. So those are feats. Now let's talk about using them in this section. You know, I spent a lot of work on all the other sections. Now if you didn't skip ahead and you made it all this way, you're awesome. I appreciate you. Thank you. You're the GOAT. I mean, everyone else, you're awesome too. You're just not, with the people who've watched the entire thing. So let's get into Paladin tactics. Firstly, when are we going to utilize our spells? This is a simple formula I've got for you. Ask yourself, what is your chance to hit this creature? Usually this is about 70% for a normal D&D curve, meaning you have a 70% chance to hit this creature. Now, subtract 10% for each person you'd help if you cast a spell. If you're between a 50 and a 40% chance, it's kind of your call. It's personal preference at that point, and arguments can be made either way. If you're 39% and lower, cast the spell. If you're 60% and up, you're probably swinging. This is not a hard and fast rule, but it's a general rule of thumb that has benefited a lot of new players. As you get more experienced and as you play more Paladins, you'll develop your taste. Now my second tip is to stay close to your allies. This is for 2 reasons. The first is that they need your aura. Your aura is a defensive measure. It is a shield, not just for you, but for your entire team. You standing close to them helps them, and vice versa, because if you're in a D&D campaign where the flanking rules are utilized, then they can give you advantage. You are fishing for criticals at all times as a paladin. Since you're fishing for criticals at all times, you want advantage as much as you can, as many dice as possible being rolled. This will necessarily produce more critical hits, and this will up your effectiveness in combat. Here, look at this example. Take this combat scenario. You have 2 hobgoblins and a goblin mage in the back. The hobgoblin on your left has been hit once. The hobgoblin on your right hasn't been hit, looking strong. The rest of your party is nearby that hobgoblin. You're within melee distance of both hobgoblins. Which one do you go and attack? I'm hoping you said the one to the right. Now, if you didn't, you're probably making the argument, well, I could have killed the other one. Yeah, but you're forgetting about that goblin mage in the back. You see, you need to provide cover for the rest of your party members. Your aura is going to stymie that mage. If you go and you attack the other hobgoblin, you're leaving the rest of your party out to dry. That aura of yours is not to be fucked with. It is powerful. So if you're constantly running off on your own, you're not helping anybody. Stop it. Too many times I see paladins running off into no man's land. Don't do that. Stay with your team. You have buffing spells for a reason. If nobody's close to you, it's a perfectly acceptable option to make everyone else more powerful around you. My third tip is to set the pace of combat. As a paladin, you are on the front line. And because of your aura, your buff spells, and your smites, you're kind of the focal point of the battlefield. Be the point guard of your offense. Run the tactics of the battle through you. Tell others what you're doing so they can plan around your aura. Let the battle flow through you. When people are working in sync with the Paladin, they can be provided the benefits of the aura, the buffs that the Paladin's spells provide. They can give advantage to the Paladin, or allow the Paladin to deal with certain threats, and attack other weaker enemies nearby, allowing the Paladin to utilize their smites to fullest effect to take down the largest enemies. And I know you might not be tactically inclined, but really, just saying what you intend to do on your turn and the next turn is enough. It doesn't even need to be what you're going to do, just what you're intending to do. I intend to attack that owlbear. I intend to move behind that wall. I intend to heal the downed bard. All these things help to set the pace of combat. Heck, if that's too much, just tell players where you're generally going to be moving. I want to generally be in this area. There are levels to this, and when you start playing a paladin, you're not going to be good at this right away, but give it time. Next up though, let's talk about lay on hands. So many times I see paladins dumping all of their lay on hands pool into themselves or one shot into another character. Stop doing that. In a lot of situations, one hit point is enough. Let me explain. If you're fighting a horde of enemies, and you're 50-50 whether you can heal a character past the point where they can survive to the next round, just give them one hit point. It does the exact same thing. Either they get hit or they don't. But lots of times in 5th edition D&D, there is no discernible difference between giving a character 1 hit point and giving a character 20 hit points. That's why a spell like, I don't know, Healing Word is so powerful. I know it might seem counterintuitive, but if you're the medic, use those hit points sparingly, at least in combat. Outside of combat, be my guest to heal up characters more fully, but inside combat, there are many scenarios where you don't have to do that. If the PC gets hit, they're going down either way. I like to maintain 10 hit points of lay on hands for emergencies. I spend these hit points one at a time. They are simply for picking characters up from unconsciousness, and that's it. So I highly recommend, don't spend all your lay on hands just on yourself, and don't spend all your lay on hands on one party member. In a majority of situations, you're just hindering yourself in the long run. And whatever you do, keep a backlog of healing so that you never completely run out. And my last tactical combat tip is to stay conscious. Yes, you are a frontline fighter. Yes, you're in the middle of things, mixing it up. But also you're the healer. Also you're the support character. You are a lot of things. Especially if you're your party's only healer, you can't afford to go unconscious. You must constantly weigh the benefits of putting yourself in danger and doing damage. I know it's harsh, but sometimes the barbarian needs to take the damage instead. The monk needs to take the hit and go unconscious. Because yes, they're your teammates, they're important. But if you go down, everyone loses access to your buffs and your healing. Understand your role in the party. If you have something like a cleric or a ranger with healing spirit, you can be a bit more reckless. But sometimes I've seen new paladins with the recklessness of a barbarian, not understanding the situation they're in where they need to be more proactive about their own safety. So keep this in mind during your next combat encounter. Talking about the Paladin class would be incomplete without talking about its multiclassing options. Paladins gain a lot through multiclassing, and I think that there are 4 classes that it gains the most from. Firstly, I need to talk about the Warlock Paladin multiclass. Warlocks have magic and the best attacking cantrip in the game, Eldritch Blast. In a way, they fulfill 2 of the Paladin's greatest weaknesses. Warlocks have fantastic range damage dealing options, and they get their spell slots back on a short rest. So if your Paladin is running out of spell slots all the time, a Warlock multiclass can help with that. Lots of players start out with a Warlock at first level, and go with the Hexblade subclass. This way they can use only Charisma for their main stat, and then they just jump right into Paladin. I have a lot of mixed feelings on this. I'm not against power gaming, just flat out I'm not. I like it when players build powerful characters, but I also don't like it when that hinders the roleplay. If a player comes to me with a story that makes sense, about why they're both a Warlock and a Paladin, I'm fine with that. Or if it's discovered in the game. But from some players with the Warlock Paladin multiclass, and the next one we're going to be talking about as well, there's a sense of trying to win D&D. Look at all the damage I can do. Look at all the different things I can do. And in some groups, I've seen this create a little bit of an arms race, where sometimes the Paladin multiclass becomes so powerful, everyone else starts sacrificing the actual visions of the characters they wanted to play, and instead just power games. You might have a group that does that and you might love it. but also some DMs and some groups don't want that at all. This is of course up to you, but I have become very hesitant over the years with Paladin multiclassing. So I am here to say there's absolutely no shame in banning this type of multiclass. Allowing multiclassing is a DM decision. You have the right to say yes or no. If you're not confident about it, you don't need to allow it. Or you can be very picky. Openly, there are some players that I trust with this type of multiclass because I've played a lot of games with them, I know how they interact with the story, and I know they're not going to take the spotlight away from all the rest of the players. There are other players I wouldn't trust with this type of multiclass in a million years. So keep that in mind as a DM who's running for a Paladin. And as a player, if you're wanting to multiclass, don't be a jackass. And if your DM says no, it's because Paladin multiclassing has a lot of flaws to it. So that's the Warlock Paladin. Then basically everything that I said still holds true with the Sorlock Paladin multiclass. This little multiclass exists for the sole purpose of getting the Paladin more spell slots. The Sorcerer takes their sorcery points as a bonus action, converts them into spell slots, and then uses them for smites. You're creating a smite engine. There are a lot of other benefits here, but again, whether you allow this multiclass or not is very campaign dependent, it's very group dependent, it's very player dependent. If you are a player and want to do this, I highly suggest talking to your DM before the campaign starts. And if you are a veteran player and they're a new DM, don't fucking do this. DMing is hard enough. They don't need the extra pressure of you completely breaking the power curve. They're trying to figure out everything. When you're bringing in a tactical nuke, that's not fair to them. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox now when it comes to the Warlock and Sorcerer multiclassing. Just, watch them. Now for other multiclassing options, I actually like multiclassing Paladins with Rogues. I think the expertise particularly put into charisma skills can add a lot for Paladins, especially if you're more the face of the party naturally. Just one level in Rogue can really help solidify you as the quote-unquote leader. Or you can get a big boost to your athletics, because your belief in your training has bestowed you with these additional abilities. And last but certainly not least, the Fighter. So I think that there are two routes to go with the Fighter Paladin subclass. On one hand, you can dip Fighter for 2 levels, and this will go ahead and get you Action Surge, so that in a pinch you can take 4 attacks per action. Still kind of busted even at higher levels, but it's still not as egregiously powerful as the Warlock or Sorcerer multiclassing. Now the second option is to go Paladin for like 8 to 10 levels, and then go Fighter the rest of the way. You do this to start picking up more ASIs, start taking more feats, just generally more abilities. I also don't hate this multiclass, because the Paladin is trading in their 4th and 5th level spell slots for ASIs and a Fighter subclass. I rank them about equal towards the end. And if you want quote-unquote more spellcasting, you can just go with an Eldritch Knight Fighter. For some players, that's what I steer them to instead of the Warlock or the Sorcerer. So yeah, Paladin multiclassing, really touchy subject. I highly recommend a Rogue or Fighter multiclass. I am skeptical and wary about the Warlock Sorcerer multiclass. Okay, we talked about multiclassing way too much. Let's talk about subclasses now. I'm only going to do a brief overview of the subclasses here, but what I really want to get across is that the Paladin subclasses should be judged in order of spells, aura, and then channel divinity. The spells that each subclass gives are the most impactful, followed by the aura. And after that, it's the channel divinity, because again, the usage of a channel divinity varies. However, if you have a really good selection of spells, your Paladin is going to be using that all the time. So in no particular order, I'm just going to give my general thoughts on all the Paladin subclasses. First up, there is the Oath of Conquest, and I love this subclass. Its selection of spells, fantastic. Armor of Agathis is one of my personal favorites. Hold Person, really nice in a pinch. Spiritual Weapon, it's a sneaky one. It is a ranged damage dealing option. It does give you an extra attack. However, it does cost a 2nd level spell slot. Personally, I think it's worth it, and I consider it a staple spell for Oath of Conquest Paladins. Then you have the Fear spell, which leads into the general theme of this Paladin, which is fear. The Oath of Conquest Paladin makes their enemies afraid. Their Aura of Conquest reduces the speed of a frightened creature to 0, and it takes psychic damage equal to half your Paladin level if it starts within 10 feet of you. What? That's crazy! But it gets even better, because the channel divinities abilities of the Oath of Conquest are also useful. Firstly, you have Guided Strike, which is just a +10 to an attack roll. If you really need something to hit, just use Guided Strike. And secondly, you have Conquering Presence, which just makes creatures afraid of you, and particularly at lower levels, when enemies don't have immunity to the Frightened condition. This is a powerful channel divinity. Actually, both of these channel divinities are fantastic. So hell yeah, I love the Oath of Conquest. Next oath, Oath of Vengeance. Again, another amazing subclass. Oath of Vengeance has incredible oath spells. I mean, it's just hit after hit. Bane, Hunter's Mark, Misty Step, Haste, Banishment, Dimension Door, Scrying. The rest of its features are fine. I don't think they're anything to write home about, and their channel divinity, while looking really nice, both of them in actual use I've found to fall flat. Still though, this subclass is kept aloft by its fantastic spells, and this is the Paladin subclass I actually recommend for new players. I think it's the easiest for them to learn and grasp. The spells are very straightforward, and you can wrap your head around an Oath of Vengeance pretty easily. New players don't have a hard time really connecting with this subclass. Next up though, we have the actual boilerplate, basic, white bread Paladin subclass, the Oath of Devotion. Oath of Devotion is fine. It is simple, it is a paladin. You don't really need to think at all, you don't really even need to use its spells. If someone is just trying to learn the core paladin class, you don't even want to really worry about the subclass, yeah, you just take Devotion. Sacred Weapon, it's fine. Turn Unholy, it's fine. Everything's fine. Nothing's bad. It is great for new players, and it's between Vengeance and Devotion for what you should suggest to a new player who's never stepped into the world of D&D before. Both, in my opinion, are super accessible and easy to use. I think Vengeance has a considerably higher ceiling though, but Devotion isn't bad. You're still a paladin, so you're still going to be powerful. Next up though is the Oath of Ancients. My summary for this subclass is become Doom Guy versus all spellcasters. Spellcasters can't touch you. You also have incredible battlefield control with your oath spells. Man, it's really tough to find a better paladin subclass after 9th level. If you're playing in a campaign where you know that you're going to the higher levels, or if you're starting a campaign around like 7th, 8th level, I would say, yeah, just go with Oath of Ancients. It's got powerful spells like Ensnaring Strike, Moonbeam, Misty Step, Plant Growth, Ice Storm, Tree Stride, and its RP spells are great as well, like Speak with Animals and Commune with Nature. Its aura of warding is fucking ridiculous, resistance to damage from all spells. Not just for you, but for your party as well. And at 15th level, you get Relentless Endurance already. This subclass is crazy. It's crazy. I'm telling you though, a paladin with plant growth and resistance to damage from spells? That's scary. Next up though, the Oath of Glory that comes from Theros. Simply put, it's a fun subclass. It's actually a really fantastic combat healer. Its channel divinity inspiring Smite is actually incredibly useful. This paladin subclass also comes with Guiding Bolt, which is an amazing low-cost range option. It has increased movement speed, but compared to other auras, it's not the best. This paladin subclass is not bad, but it's not more than good. That is, though, in comparison to other paladin subclasses. You're still gonna wreck house with Oath of Glory. Next, though, we're gonna talk about Matthew Mercer in Critical Role's Oath of the Open Sea. This is an interesting one. After 9th level has an incredibly long strike range, as it gains the spell Call Lightning. Things like Marine Lair really offer extreme amounts of battlefield control. Its aura promotes movement. Its 15th level ability denies movement. Really, this is the Oath of the Open Battlefield. You can't lock anybody down when this warlock is there. Surprisingly though, it's like fine in the water. You don't get any penalties to movement, but otherwise I think other paladin subclasses could do just as well. But this paladin subclass is very strong, has great movement abilities, its spells are solid. I mean, 2 thumbs up. Not bad, Mercer. Next up though, we have the Oath of the Watchers. I don't see this paladin subclass getting talked about enough. It's really good at attacking anything that isn't a beast or a human. Fae, fiends, undead, elementals, celestials. Yeah, this subclass makes all of those its bitch. Its Aura of the Sentinel is very useful, as who doesn't want an extra bonus to their initiative? Its channel divinities are situational and very campaign dependent, but if you take the Oath of the Watchers into the right campaign, it's going to be an absolute menace. I personally love this subclass, and in the right campaign like Descent into Avernus or Curse of Strahd, Oath of the Watchers is going to dominate. So don't let this particular subclass fly under your radar. Next up we have Oathbreaker. This is the worst player paladin subclass. it is really a DM only subclass. I look at this subclass as a punishment for players that break their oath, because basically, like, none of it is useful. I've ran for Oathbreaker Paladins a few times. The players enjoyed the campaign, but all of them agreed that the Oathbreaker really isn't designed for players. It's meant for NPCs who work around fiends and undead. Next up is Oath of the Crown. This subclass can be summarized as 1v1 me bro. It's about duels, fighting your enemies one-on-one. It's also an anti-TPK machine. Seriously, its channel Divinity Turn the Tide? Yeah, that's just designed to stop party wipes. That's it. I also really like the spells that it has. I think also this is one of the easiest Paladin subclasses to be evil with, because what is more evil than the government? And last but certainly not least, what I consider to be the best Paladin subclass, it's the Oath of Redemption Paladin. Look, I'm gonna need you to listen to me really carefully. Every part of this subclass is perfect. Its spells, incredible. Its channel divinities, god tier. Its 7th level aura, love it. Regeneration at 15th level, yes please. A Giga Chad avatar form at 20th level, the cherry on top, it's perfect. Absolutely fucking perfect. I would change nothing. I mean, you become a tank god, you become an RP god, you just become a god when you take this subclass. For a long time, Oath of Conquest I thought was the best subclass in the game. No. Oath of Redemption. I love this subclass so much. As I said at the start of this video, more than an hour ago, Paladins are the best class in D&D. While I don't think they're the strongest, they can stand alone, which poses some problems for a team-based game. I think the one problem with Paladins is that they're just too good with everything. They don't have any glaring weaknesses, especially for newer DMs. There's not something baked into the mechanics that they just can't do. We can argue that a Paladin doesn't do ranged damage, but they have ways of getting around this, like teleportation, or getting Guiding Bolt with a subclass, or just using their litany of buffing spells if they can't reach anything. What do they need to rely on another party member for? The answer is not really anything. So I have 3 ideas to bring Paladins back in line with other classes. My first idea is to just reduce their hit die to a D8. Less health means the Charisma Constitution choice is even more pressing. Even then, they won't have enough health to do everything alone. My second idea is to remove any type of magical teleportation or ranged attack, except for the Oath of Glory's Guiding Bolt. I think that Guiding Bolt is really central to making that entire subclass work, because without that spell, the subclass is just very mid. But other Paladins just have way too many options of sneaking up on people, from Misty Step to Haste. I understand the argument is made that the Paladin has to use spell slot resources in order to do these things, but that's also based off of the attrition argument. As we've previously discussed, Paladins don't really suffer from that attrition all that much. At least not from what I've seen. Not how many others are claiming they play D&D in the modern day. So simply just remove those spells from their list. Plain and simple. Paladins still get to be great at everything else they do. There will now just be this one definitive chink in their armor. My third idea, reduce the lay on hands pool by half. Probably 3 hit points per level. A Paladin right now being able to act as a main healer is a bit too much. By scaling back the lay on hands pool, you still reserve the right to make them a battlefield medic. However, they can't go around and top party members off after every combat. They just don't have enough lay on hands for that. I'm okay with making the Paladin really good at burn damage, but the rest of the stuff, Jack of many, Master of none. With these changes, you now solidify 2 weaknesses the Paladin has. One being that it needs to rely on others for healing, the second is that it needs to rely on others for ranged damage. And I will say that I actually do not mind the once per turn smite that OneDnD is proposing. I think it really helps to chill Paladins out and brings it more in line with the rogue. Now, do I think all these ideas should be applied at once to the Paladin? No. But I do think the class could be dialed back just a bit. But not too much, because the Paladin is one of my most beloved classes. If you don't know what to play, the Paladin is right there for you. But maybe you don't want to play a Paladin. And if that's the case, may I suggest checking out this video right here. Maybe a fighter is more your speed. And if you made it this far, thank you for all the support, and thank you for entering the dungeon.